Welcome to our second lesson focusing on smartphone photography. Today we're going to push our photography skills even further by using everything we've already learned in Monday's lesson to produce a set of photographs that successfully document our daily lives. As well as employing the skills we've practiced on Monday, we're also going to introduce some new ideas to help us capture our daily lives in a fresh perspective. These will include creative framing techniques, lighting, shadows, patterns and leading lines. And lastly, we will also be practicing those all-important analysing skills by reflecting on our own work and a photographer of your choosing. Well done everyone who contributed to the Menti-Mito question from Monday's lesson. Some brilliant answers here and all vital for making great photography, so well done. To kickstart today's lesson, I want us to compare the differences in these two images. Pick which image you think works best, and then I'm going to give you 1 minute to write down 3 reasons why you think that image works better than the other. A little tip to help you with this task is to remember the themes from Monday's lesson. As I mentioned on the previous slide, the themes of Monday's photo tasks are really going to help us a lot during today's lesson. So let's recap the themes now. We focused on camera functions, lighting, composition, camera angle, backgrounds and colour. These are all great factors to keep in mind when you're taking any photographs, and you should be thinking about them throughout today's photo tasks as well. Let's take a closer look at these images. I took both the images during my morning workout because I just liked the way the weights laid naturally and unstaged. I thought they told a story of exercise and movement and strength, but in a subtle way. Both the images are taken at exactly the same time with one little difference, the camera angle. And the impact this has had on the final image is huge. I consider B to be the better image. By changing the camera angle from high to low, I've managed to create depth in the image instead of it being flat as it looks in A. We can now see the foreground and the detail on the biggest weight and the weights appearing smaller in the background. The lighting has gone from subtle and even in image A to more dramatic and direct, as the light source, the window, is now directly behind the weights. Now, even though the colours haven't changed within the frame, they do appear more defined by this change in lighting, creating more tonal range and a higher contrast, which again adds depth. All these factors have created a moody and dramatic, almost monochromatic image that I think works quite well to represent the mood of my morning workout. Today we're going to be looking at documentary photography. And firstly, I want us to consider what documentary photography actually means. So, it's a style of photography that presents straightforward records of events, people and places, often recording important historical or political moments. It can also be seen as art which captures real moments, rather than staged moments, which most photography does. It can also draw attention to difficult or dangerous world issues which require some form of remedial or political action. And in case you haven't already noticed, we are in the middle of a pandemic. We are going through things in our daily lives which people haven't experienced ever. And people could be looking back on our documentary photographs in years to come that will paint the picture of what we are going through right now. Photography is a powerful tool, and I want us to use it to show our own personal representations of the world we are living in. Photographers have been documenting lives for decades, from as early as the 1930s, when pioneering documentary photographer Walker Evans captured people's lives during the Great Depression, through to famous current-day photographers like Steve McCurry, whose work focuses on conflicts and cultures. I want us to create photos today and the rest of the project that can stand the test of time. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a video that focuses on the theme of capturing moments throughout the day. And I'd like you to take notes throughout this video. You can use the questions on this slide to help guide your note taking.
The challenge is to take 3 to 5 photos during one day, during a little adventure, outing, whatever you have. Even if you're just sitting at home, get creative. Take 3 to 5 photos. You can edit them and then share them with us. And now I have done this already. I went out on a little adventure with my sons. They're twin boys, 2.5 years old. We like going out on bike rides. I put them in the trailer. So this past weekend, I went out with them. I brought my phone with the mindset of I want to capture a few moments from this day. So I'm going to share them with you, but make sure you take action in this course. I'll be sharing how you can actually post your photos and share them with us in the following lesson. We went to the local university there, and I find that universities often have some interesting architecture, nature, plants, things like that that make great photos. So got out of the bike, walked around, and one of the cool things that my sons like to do is run up ramps. So if there's a ramp, my kids are gonna run up and down it. And so there was this ramp here that was a really big ramp. It was like super exciting for them. So what I was trying to do was photograph one of my sons with the leading lines of these handrails leading your eye towards him. And so you can see this photo that I edited, made it black and white to give it a little bit of drama. It also makes the shadow of him pop a little bit more, creates somewhat of a silhouette. And I think this, I actually really love this photo. I've got the tree up in the top corner as well, and the building on the left that kind of frames everything within this frame. All these things we're going to talk about in composition wise. Lighting wise, of course, getting the sun behind allowed me to get more of the silhouette of my son. And in terms of editing, like I said, black and white, making it a little bit more dramatic. We walked around and there were some beautiful flower bushes, and we saw some with some bees, and even with my smartphone I was able to get some good photos of the bee and the flower, some macro shots. But one of my favorite ones is just of this rose right here. I love the delicate way that the petals flow together. It doesn't have a lot of contrast, so I edited it to kind of boost the contrast of the darks and the highlights. Again, if I'm going too fast, try not to worry. We're going to be covering all of these things in depth in future lessons, but basically making the darks darker, the brights brighter to make it pop a little bit more. And I added a warm filter, just editing it right within my iPhone using the iPhone standard photo app. All of the features that I use to edit this photo are available on most smartphones. It's fall here in Southern California, and we don't get a ton of color, but if you look around, you can find it. So my goal was trying to find some leaves on the ground to give it that fall vibe. And so here's one that I actually ended up picking because it's got that 5 sort of point maple leaf that you don't actually see the points in this photo, but you see the veins of this leaf kind of converging in the middle of the frame. I edited it and cropped it so that the stem of the leaf was right in the middle. So the top half is just this blurred out background of the leaves in the background. And then the foreground, of course, is the leaf itself. Again, giving it sort of a warm vibe, playing with warmth, saturation, and some filters to make that warm fall feeling come alive. But I love this photo as an example of how you can get a really blurry, nice background. That shallow depth of field is something we'll talk about in this course, where it makes your photos look a little bit more professional, or at least has that professional style to it. And you can get that on a smartphone, even if your smartphone doesn't have what's called portrait mode, which is sort of a newer feature in the past couple of years that allows you to get that shallow depth of field on some higher end smartphones. But even without that, there's ways to get a blurry background, and this is one of them. I just got really close up to that leaf, really close to the ground. The background was pretty far away. I didn't add any blur or anything like that in editing. It just had that look because I was so close to the leaf, and then the background was a little bit far away. Stairs, another thing my sons love, practicing walking up and down stairs. So there were a few staircases. There was one that I tried to get a good shot of, but it was kind of boring. It just had some shadows from the tree above. I got low to the ground, kind of tried to change up my angle, but even though it was like a symmetrical shot, it wasn't that good. But we walked around to the other side of the building, and I noticed because the sunlight was casting shadows on this new staircase, this other staircase in a different angle, the shadows looked pretty cool. So the original photo, it's just kind of standard, but when I'm looking for creative shots like this, I'm often looking for shadows. I'm looking for things that can have contrast, especially if I pull that out in post. And so as I edited this photo, I cropped it, I straightened it so that the lines perfectly horizontal across the frame, and then the shadow of the wall and the handrail above it just looked really, really cool in my opinion. So this is more of like an abstract shot, but I thought it came out pretty cool for a photo that I shot with my phone. And then lastly, we walked around and there was this really cool building with these big glass windows. And so at first I was trying to figure out how I can get a nice reflection of the outside setting, because that's what you can see. And I got a decent photo of these succulents and plants that I thought looked kind of cool, looked kind of mirrored. But then one of my sons ran up to the window and was looking at himself and was having a really good time. And I thought it looked pretty cool. We had this balcony at the top that created these leading lines that sort of draw the eye's attention down to my son's head. He's wearing his big helmet and he's just looking at himself in the reflection. I cropped it square so that this would be a good photo to post on social media, on Instagram, and then I made it black and white. There was just something about this photo in color that didn't look as interesting to me. And one of my tricks is just to drop the saturation, see what it looks like in black and white. And oftentimes, to me, it looks a little bit more artistic or creative when it's in black and white. I don't mean to say that this is something you should do to every single photo that you take, but for me, that's what happened with this photo. It just looked really nice in black and white. I added a little bit of a vignette and a filter to make the contrast pop a little bit more. And all in all, this is a photo that, while the composition and the lighting is somewhat interesting, it's not perfect, but it's more about the story of this photo than anything else. I think out of all of the photos that I've shared with you, the other ones were interesting in terms of subject matter, in terms of composition and lighting, but this one is the one that I'm going to look back on and remember, wow, that was the time that I was there with my sons and they were having so much fun running around, looking at their reflections, running up the ramps, trying to climb up steps. And that's really the story that I want to share with my photography.
That video should give you an idea of the key elements to keep in mind throughout today's photo task. And the theme for today's photo task is a day in the life of yourself. You can spend a total of 40 minutes throughout the day on this task, and I don't want those 40 minutes to be all together. I want you to find inspiration in your normal daily routines and highlight particular things that grab your attention and capture them in a creative way. You should end up with 4 final images, and you should factor in all those key elements we practiced on Monday. And I'm going to introduce some new ideas over the next few slides that I'd like you to try to include as well, to just really push your creativity for this task. Here's an image from one part of my daily routine, and I was inspired to capture this image when I logged in to my emails, ready to get stuck into work, and the sun shined through my window into my glass of water and created these lovely, amazing light reflections onto my desk. It just made me study the flowers and the vase a bit more closer, and I realised that the shapes of the vase and the glass actually complemented each other. So then I shot this image from down low in order to show these shapes. And it helped me capture those dramatic shadows and light that was shining in through the water. By coming down low with my camera, I was able to look down the windowsill. I removed the background clutter and also introduced a leading line with the windowsill that creates a dynamic composition. There's also some really great diffraction effect happening in the pint glass, which has created abstract shapes from the daffodils, which I really like. Extra examples of the creative techniques I used for this image. So we've got leading lines and also the relationship between light and water. These are really great techniques to introduce into your work to help us see the world from a different perspective. This is probably my favourite image. I was inspired to take this shot when I was trying and failing to take a picture of my nephew, who hates the camera and just runs away. But it did make me look at the scene in a little bit more detail. I moved a bit closer and I realised the treehouse was actually an amazing frame. When I looked directly into the window, I was able to capture the treehouse with a different perspective. There's a natural symmetry happening in this image, which has created a balanced and pleasing composition. Now, notice that I've broken the rule of thirds that I introduced to you last week by putting the treehouse in the centre of the frame, but I've done that to create a symmetry feel within the photo. If you're able to reason your decision for breaking the rules, then that's absolutely fine, but it needs to be discussed in your annotation notes. Rules are there to support and help you, but also rules are meant to be broken. You are the decision maker and this is your work, so make it your own and back it up with your notes. These are some lovely examples of how we can find framing by looking through things. Framing can be an imaginative way of capturing something that otherwise looks pretty ordinary. You can also see how symmetry can create dynamic and almost abstract compositions. Don't be scared to experiment, these decisions are yours to make. This image is proof that you can find inspiration wherever you look. I took inspiration to capture this image while I was washing the dishes. So again, the sun shined in through the window and it created these lovely shadows on the worktop. So I had an experiment and I moved the drying rack around a little bit and it created these heart-shaped patterns which I loved. This image shows that documentary photography is a great way to capture emotions as well as just documenting events. And with this is a perfect way to capture optimism during difficult times that come hand in hand with lockdown. So try to include emotions within your work wherever possible. And you can do this in subtle ways. It doesn't have to be in your face. Be creative and think outside of the box in how you can include emotion. These are some lovely examples of how we can include emotion within our work in subtle ways and also being creative in what we make with our cameras. So by using shadows, it can be very suggestive and actually make the viewer consider what's happening outside the frame, which makes the final photograph really intriguing and successful. We can also focus on pattern, and repetitiveness is something that's used quite often throughout photography to help create thought-provoking images. So here you have my 4 final images from throughout the day, taken from different moments of inspiration, captured using various techniques, controlled to impact the way I display my world to you, the viewer. Once you've taken your final images, we need to provide annotated notes alongside the photos. I want you to analyse your own work by providing your thought process behind each image, details on the image, and your reflections, just as I've been doing throughout the previous slides. You can use these questions to help guide your annotations for the photo tasks, and I'd like you to spend around 20 minutes annotating your work. What might be helpful is to create a Word document and put your photos and your notes alongside each other so they flow nice and easily and sync up. The final task for today's lesson is a worksheet which you can find under the assignment in Teams. The link on the worksheet will take you to a collection of images which are all inspired by lockdown caused by coronavirus. These documentary photographs are playing a vital role in the current situation as it provides insight into life as we know it today. And historians are going to look back on these images and try to make sense of the situation. So let's consider the success of these images. Do you think they reflect our times well and successfully? I'd like you to follow the link and select one of your favourite image throughout this list, and then use that image to help you answer the questions on the sheet to analyse that image. Follow the points on the screen now to help you get the best results out of today's tasks. So firstly, you need to create 4 images that successfully capture your daily routine. And these images should provide a fresh perspective and use creative techniques that have been introduced throughout today's lesson. You should also provide annotated notes for your photos detailing the processes and personal reflections of your own work. Remember, you can do this nice and neatly by creating a Word document and adding the photos and your notes side by side. And lastly, you should have chosen a lockdown-inspired documentary photograph and completed the analysing worksheet. When it comes to handing your work in for today's lesson, I'm looking for 3 different things. Firstly, your notes, and these are the notes from the Spot the Different task, and also the notes from the video. I'd like to just see them to make sure you're keeping on top of the note taken during the lessons. Then I'd like to see your photo tasks, and these photo tasks include 4 images that document your day and also your annotation notes. Now remember, these can be put side by side in a Word document to just help see them all together nice and neatly. And then lastly, I want the analysing worksheet with your chosen image and notes. So 3 separate things to hand in for today's lesson, please guys. I hope you enjoy the work and I look forward to seeing what you create.